Welcome back, everyone, and today we pause together to honor the American icons we have recently lost, as well as other cherished figures from around the world whose lives left a lasting mark. If this tribute resonates with you, a like would mean a great deal. It helps us keep producing these memorials with the dignity and sincerity they deserve. We're glad you're here. Let's take this moment together. When a guitar like that one goes silent, the world feels it differently. Ross Friedman passed away at the age of 72. If you were anywhere near that scene, if you felt it even through a crackling speaker in a dark room, you already know what that name means. It wasn't fame built on magazine covers or radio playlists. It was earned in cramped venues, through deafening amplifiers, through nights that stretched well past any reasonable hour. The announcement came without fanfare. No press release designed for attention, just a few words that settled into you slowly and got heavier the longer you held them. Long before anyone was talking about polished production, there were the dictators. New York, mid-70s. Raw energy, street-level attitude, music that didn't apologize for what it was. Every note sounded like the city it came from. Then came Manoir, a bigger stage, a grander sound, but still unmistakably real. Ross was never just a musician filling space. He was the engine. That guitar tone of his, cutting and relentless, was impossible to unhear once you'd caught it. Away from the spotlight, people described someone entirely different from what the music might suggest. Calm, deliberate, still deeply invested in the craft decades after most would have coasted on reputation. He kept creating, kept touring, kept searching for something new, not out of obligation but out of genuine love for the music. That's a rare thing. Time has a strange way of tricking us. Those albums feel like they've just been sitting on a shelf, untouched. But moments like this remind us they were never really still. Tonight, in some corner of the world, someone will press play on one of those old recordings and turn the volume up just a little more than they normally would. And for those few minutes, it won't feel like a farewell. Some performers don't need the center of the stage to be remembered. Paul Seed passed at 78, and while the name might not spark instant recognition for everyone, the work certainly will. There was no grand announcement surrounding his passing, just a quiet confirmation that suited a man who built his career on substance rather than spectacle. He came of age in British television during an era when it felt intimate, when programs like Z Cars and Coronation Street weren't background noise but a genuine part of daily life. People didn't rush through them. They showed up for them. And Paul was a consistent presence through all of it, in front of the camera in earlier years and later behind it, shaping stories rather than just appearing in them. Doctor Who. Survivors. Touchstones of an era that many carry with them still. No flashy headlines, no award season campaigns, just reliable, grounded, human work. That kind of contribution rarely gets the tribute it deserves in the moment. But losing it makes the absence impossible to ignore. 54 is not an age that prepares you. Nicholas Brendon is gone, and that sentence still doesn't sit right. It probably won't for a while. Word spread simply, without much build-up, and that almost made it worse. For millions who grew up in the late 90s, he was Xander Harris, not the Slayer, not the one with powers or destiny, just the loyal, steady, deeply human friend who kept showing up anyway. There was a truthfulness to that performance that audiences held on to. Those Tuesday nights in front of the television, no streaming, no second screen, just the story unfolding at its own pace. He was the one who made you laugh when things got unbearable and surprised you with quiet courage when it mattered most. He carried that same presence into Criminal Minds years later, a little older, a little heavier with life, but recognizable. His personal struggles were never far from public view, and perhaps that's part of why so many people felt a genuine connection. He didn't perform in vulnerability. He was honest about being human. Characters freeze in time. The people behind them don't. Someone tonight will stumble across an old episode, maybe not even looking for it, and he'll be right there, unchanged, just as they remembered him. She never needed volume to hold a room. Valerie Pine passed at 82, and the memories she left behind come back in specific ways. A line reading. A particular expression. A moment on screen that felt realer than the scene around it. Her passing was confirmed quietly, and there was something fitting about that. She emerged as a striking presence in the mid-1970s, a period when cinema was taking risks, when films were allowed to be uncomfortable and honest. Her work in Lenny opposite Dustin Hoffman wasn't just impressive, it was earned and complex, enough to bring her an Academy Award nomination and announce her as someone genuinely worth watching. Then Superman arrived in 1978 and she stepped into something entirely different without missing a beat. That kind of range isn't common. Behind the performances, her life held real difficulty. Years of health challenges that weren't always visible on screen, stretches of time that required more resilience than most people realized. But she endured. What she leaves behind isn't just a filmography. It's a feeling, something intangible that clings to the scenes she inhabited and refuses to let go. Even as a child, there was something in his voice that made people pause. Nothing showy about it, nothing that demanded your attention. It simply had a quality that was difficult to define and impossible to dismiss. Michael Macdonald came into the world on February 12, 1952, in St. Louis, Missouri. It was a grounded, working-class upbringing, far removed from any sense of inevitable stardom. Music was always present, drifting from radios, spinning on record players, woven into the texture of ordinary days. Nobody looked at the young Michael Macdonald and predicted greatness. He wasn't that kind of kid. But something was quietly taking shape inside him. He absorbed gospel, soul, music that communicated something deeper than its lyrics, and it got into him in ways that would only reveal themselves later. The doubts were real too. About whether he belonged, whether his voice fit anywhere, whether leaving home made any sense at all. He left anyway, drawn forward by something he couldn't quite name, which is perhaps the only honest way any of this ever begins. The Los Angeles he arrived in during the early 1970s wasn't holding a spot for him. It was saturated with ambition and full of people who wanted exactly what he wanted. He came in quietly, as a background vocalist, a session player, a voice attached to someone else's project. But voices like his don't stay invisible forever. Gradually, ears started turning. By the mid-70s, he was working alongside Steely Dan, music that demanded precision and rewarded depth, and he belonged there. Then the Doobie Brothers. A different world entirely, but the fit was undeniable. What a Fool Believes didn't just chart. It became one of those songs that attaches itself to moments in people's lives and never fully detaches. Suddenly that voice was everywhere, and still it never pushed, never insisted. It simply arrived and stayed. But success rarely tells the whole story. From the outside, Michael Macdonald had everything figured out. Hit records, a signature sound, a career that seemed to run on its own momentum. From the inside, it was more complicated. The pressure of the late 70s and early 80s was relentless. Delivering again and again, touring endlessly, living inside an expectation that didn't pause between albums. He has spoken about his struggles with substance use with a plainness that avoids self-pity, the honesty of someone who understands how quickly the ground can shift beneath you. There were unsteady years. Periods where the music continued but the man behind it was quietly fraying. And yet he never vanished entirely. He kept showing up, kept working through the difficulty, even when nothing felt certain. That persistence, unglamorous and undocumented, is the part of a life that rarely makes it into the tributes. But it matters. It might be the part that matters most. Recovery, when it came, wasn't a dramatic turning point. It was a daily decision, made quietly and recommitted to regularly. And it changed his music in ways that were hard to articulate but easy to feel. The urgency softened. The need to prove something lifted. When he returned in the early 2000s with recordings rooted in soul and personal interpretation, audiences who had grown alongside him understood immediately. It wasn't nostalgia they were responding to. It was recognition. The sound of someone who had been through something real and come out the other side without pretending the journey hadn't happened. He didn't reinvent himself or chase relevance. He simply settled more fully into himself, and that turned out to be more than enough. His life now is quieter, and he seems to prefer it that way. He still sings, still steps onto stages, but without the weight of an image to maintain. His voice has aged alongside him and is richer for it, carrying the kind of authority that only comes from having actually lived through what you're singing about. For the people who first heard him decades ago, that voice is bound up with memories that have nothing to do with concerts or albums. It was there through pivotal moments, through grief and celebration and all the unremarkable days in between that somehow become the ones you remember. What Michael Macdonald represents, more than any song or accolade, is the possibility of endurance. Of bending under pressure and returning. Of finding that the truest version of yourself was always the most powerful one. And when he sings now, that's exactly what comes through. Not a performance. Just presence. The kind that, once it gets into you, never really leaves. His life now is quieter, and he seems to prefer it that way. He still sings, still steps onto stages, but without the weight of an image to maintain. His voice has aged alongside him and is richer for it, carrying the kind of authority that only comes from having actually lived through what you're singing about. For the people who first heard him decades ago, that voice is bound up with memories that have nothing to do with concerts or albums. It was there through pivotal moments, through grief and celebration and all the unremarkable days in between that somehow become the ones you remember. What Michael Macdonald represents, more than any song or accolade, is the possibility of endurance. Of bending under pressure and returning. Of finding that the truest version of yourself was always the most powerful one. And when he sings now, that's exactly what comes through. Not a performance. Just presence. The kind that, once it gets into you, never really leaves.